Hey everybody, this is Inky right here. This is a bit of a different video from what I usually do, but I figured I would go ahead because over the past couple of years, I have been working on a little project called Sonic 3 Boxer Basher, which basically relates to the bigger, let's just say, like, wealth and knowledge that a lot more people, even outside of the Sonic community, probably have regarding Michael Jackson's involvement in the soundtrack for the third game, and Knuckles, for those that know. And the past few years, I've had this Google Doc here where I've been gathering, like, all of the information that I possibly can from, like, firsthand sources. There was this book by Michael's Japanese assistant during the creation of the game. She wrote, like, a little memoir for him when he passed, and there is a section about Sonic 3. They don't name it directly, but if you connect the dots, it pretty much just seems like that's what it is, so. But, yeah, that coupled with just all the other connections the fans have made, as well as, other nuggets that people usually don't bring up. I've put those all together here into this little anecdote piece here, and I figured I would finally sit down and record the current draft as of May 2026. It probably won't get any substantial updates in the future, honestly, but I figured I would get this out there so that more people are aware of, like, the complete picture of, like, just beyond, like, oh yeah, Michael is involved, but, like, how was he involved? What happened, So I figured this would help, to get more awareness out there. So, yeah, hopefully y'all enjoy this. Also, I will be switching between, like, translated excerpts, at least, like, roughly translated, from Michael's assistant's memoir. Her name is Mayumi Nini Sakazaki. She's in the special thanks section of Sonic 3's credits, if you want to look out for her next time you're playing. And I will also be going to, like, the passages I wrote, which feature the information I've gathered elsewhere. So, yeah, I'll make sure to indicate when I'm reading which parts. I'm also going to leave the Google Doc in the description, of course, for those who want to just read it at their own pace. Okay. I came here because I love Sega games. I believe that's a quote from Michael. During his first visit to Japan, one of the places Michael wanted to go was the headquarters of the game manufacturer Sega. From the late 1980s to the early 1990s, moving arcade games were at their peak. Sega was continuously developing new games, and it seems that in America, they had a strong image as a cool company doing things that had never been imagined before. Michael was likely strongly attracted to Sega's creativity. He quickly made an appointment and visited, and the person who attended to him at that time was Hisashi Suzuki. At that time, Mr. Suzuki was an executive director at Sega, and also the head of the development department. On the day Michael first visited Sega, Mr. Suzuki guided him and the others into the development room, which was normally off limits to outsiders, and carefully examined the games that were in development. Michael was particularly intrigued by a game called Outrun. The game involved driving around a sports car through beautiful scenery from around the world, and it featured 3 background music tracks that players could choose from. Michael, who was completely taken with the BGM, that stands for background music, quickly memorized the melody and hummed along, asking Mr. Suzuki, "Who composed this song?" When Mr. Suzuki replied, "It's from Sega's sound staff," Michael said, "This is a wonderful song. I would love to meet that staff." When Michael was taken to the sound room, he seemed very pleased and interested in the differences from the studio he usually used, saying, "I didn't know studios like this existed." Michael greeted Mr. Suzuki by saying, "I came here because I like Sega's games," to which Mr. Suzuki responded, "Of course I knew about you, but I hadn't listened to your music. I heard it for the first time today, and it's quite good." Michael also mentioned, "I'm not really a fan, so I don't need an autograph." Perhaps there weren't many people around him who treated him that way. Michael and Mr. Suzuki became quite close and had great conversations. Later, Mr. Suzuki received a signed jacket from Michael as a gift, but he didn't take it home, thinking, "I can't keep this just for myself." It is said that the jacket is still stored in Sega's headquarters, even after Mr. Suzuki retired. In Sega's sound room, there were no instruments, and everyone was silently working on input tasks while wearing headphones. In such a situation, it must have been hard for him to believe that music could be created. When Michael visited Sega headquarters, he was amazed to see cutting-edge technology, such as visuals, that were far ahead of commercialized games, saying, "I thought I knew a lot about games, but now technology has advanced to this level." Michael often said, "We need something new. I want to do something new all the time to please the fans, and I don't want to do the same thing as others." For someone like Michael, Sega must have seemed like a treasure trove. From then on, every time he came to Japan, he made sure to visit Sega at least once. In 1990, Sega created the arcade and Mega Drive home console versions of the first collaboration work with Michael, Moonwalker. At that time, Mr. Suzuki told the staff, "Be prepared. Just getting a license and using Michael's name to make a run-of-the-mill game won't satisfy him." So that was the first of Mayumi's writings. Now it's going to switch over to mine. Michael Jackson was reportedly a huge fan of the Sonic games on the Sega Genesis, and held a huge appreciation for the brand as a whole, which had first brought the Bluebird to international fame in 91 to 93. He had first contacted Sega regarding making a game which could capture his persona in correlation with his promotional anthology film, Moonwalker. Jackson assisted with game design on both the arcade and console versions, which there was a jacket given as a gift for. Serving as a flagship title for the console, the game featured chiptune renditions of the tracks Another Part of Me, Bad, Beat It, Billie Jean, and Smooth Criminal. They were arranged by Hiroshi Kubota, who later transcribed all of Masato Nakamura's tunes for the first Sonic game, to play on the FM and PSG sound chips, also called the YM2612 and SN76489 respectively, which featured a 9-channel layout to produce music and sound effects, along with original tracks exclusive to the title. Outside of Thriller being pulled from the graveyard stages due to legal issues, the soundtrack turned out quite well and used the capabilities of the hardware to their advantage in delivering the signature style MJ was known for, while also sounding video gamey. Okay, now it's back to Mayumi's writing. Now the truth is revealed. The struggles of Naoki Nimiya and others. It was indeed in 1993, but Michael was also involved in composing video game music. At one point, while Mr. Suzuki was talking to Michael about games, he asked, "The adventure game we are currently planning has various scenes, and each will have its own music. Michael, would you like to try creating that music?" Here, too, Mr. Suzuki maintained the attitude of, "If you want to do it, I'll let you create it." And I was surprised by what he was about to say. However, even more surprisingly, Michael responded, "I want to give it a try." Mr. Suzuki explained, "It will cost money to develop, so it won't be a business for you. However, if this project succeeds, I will reward you in some way." The Japanese people, Michael loved. By the way, there was a time where I visited Michael with Mr. Suzuki at a recording studio in Los Angeles. The studio's office had severe leaks, and Mr. Suzuki asked Michael, "Why are you recording in a place like this? If you went to New York, there would be better studios." Michael replied, "It's true that the studios in New York are nice, but the sound becomes hard. Here, the sound is softer and better." This episode gives a glimpse into Michael's obsession with sound. When the actual music production began, Mr. Suzuki sent Sega's sound team, along with computers and equipment, to a hotel in Los Angeles. Accompanying the sound team at the time was the bilingual coordinator, Mr. Minya. Okay, now it's back to writing. While some parts are seemingly cryptic, this adventure game is Sonic 3. Michael had sprained his ankle midway through his Dangerous World tour at the time. He called up Roger Hector of Sega Technical Institute, STI for short, located in Palo Alto, California, deciding he wanted to visit where Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was being made at the time. Michael toured around the place, walking on crutches and having murals later engraved where he walked. He toured the multimedia studio where he was bored by Jurassic Park on Sega CD, but later enthusiastic about the work going on with in-house composer Spencer Nielsen's space. During the discussion in the conference room at the team, a developer asked if Michael was interested in doing a finalized soundtrack for Sonic 3. He responded he'd do all of it, without much hesitation. A prototype build dated November 3rd, 1993, though data suggests it was actually created in October, was found in 2019, with a full set of tracks done in-house, as well as partially outsourced to Cube, Opus, etc., before Michael came on. which was because Nakamura didn't return to compose because of wanting more royalties. Okay, back to Mayumi. Michael said, "You don't have to do anything for me. I want to do it myself. Instead, if that game is a hit and makes a profit, I would like you to donate a percentage of it, in my name, to poor children around the world." Additionally, Mr. Suzuki told Michael, "This game series is amazing. It will sell about 6 million copies." However, Michael, who usually doesn't boast much, whispered this time, "My thriller sold 70 million copies." It's just, I'm reading that paragraph, and I know I'm diverting from the reading, or it's just kind of funny. He says that Mr. Suzuki says it would be 6 million copies. Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles combined was 4. So, anyway, back to Mayumi's writing. When it was decided to ask Michael to compose music, Mr. Suzuki first explained the game scenes with words. However, Michael kept saying, "I can't imagine it." So as soon as they switched to explaining with storyboards, it was clear to see that images began to form in Michael's mind at an incredible pace. Mr. Suzuki realized, to stimulate his imagination, it has to be visual, not verbal. He seems to have answered, "He's a good way. There's no other way to say it." When asked by Suzuki-san what kind of person was Michael, Suzuki-san replied, "He was the coordinator with the staff on site." When the work with Michael was confirmed, it seems that he placed full trust in Brad. The composition was progressing in the form of playing chords and turning them into sheet music. Michael would hum ideas and melodies to Brad, who would then translate them on the keyboard. It is said that he once visited the studio and saw that Michael had a musical sense. Moreover, at one point, the group was told by Brad, "I'll show you Michael's composing scene." The exchanges during their stay in Los Angeles were mainly with Michael's musical director. They had a repetitive process of playing recorded original sounds, converting them into game music at night, and bringing them back to the studio the next day to let Michaels and the others listen, receiving feedback and requests for revisions. It's my writing again. Brad Buxer was Michael Jackson's musical director at the time. He was assigned by Michael to do all 41 of the music cues, with only one of them being done directly between the two. He gathered 5 colleagues to collaborate with: Bobby Brooks, Doug Grigsby III, Darryl Ross, Jeff Grace, and Sirocco Jones, and they set hastily to work. Brad would formulate compositions based not only on his own and the team's materials, but also use Michael's ideas for melodies through his improvisational vocal talents, all influenced between the releases of the Dangerous and History albums. Michael sent a demo tape to Sega, which featured him beatboxing several of the new tracks. Production took place in Record 1 with this day and night process, as Michael called individuals in the group, such as Sirocco, to provide and sing his ideas. There was a room set up where Michael could take a break and do recreational activities, which sometimes was playing Sonic games. Truly a gamer among a group of non-gamers. Okay, back to Mayumi's writing. Now waiting for the group upon their arrival at Los Angeles was this. During one day at the studio, when Michael first heard the music converted for the game, he was reportedly very disappointed and was told by Brad at one point, "The sound quality is too poor to release it as Michael's music." However, Mr. Naminya and others convinced him, saying, "Not all of Michael's fans listen to his music in stereo. There are fans who enjoy watching Michael's video clips on TV and listening to his songs on radio. While there are constraints in game music, let's make sure that Michael's spirit is conveyed within those limits." They ultimately set the goal of achieving the highest level of sound quality for a game console as heard on television, and proceeded with their work. In the end, Mr. Naminya and his team stayed in Los Angeles for 2 weeks longer than initially planned. However, since there were still a few minor issues remaining, they continued working even after returning to Japan. Then, in early September 1993, to obtain final approval from Michael, who had come to Japan for a performance at the Fukuoka Dome, Mr. Naminya and Sega's sound team flew to Kyushu once again, bringing their equipment. "I'll create a new song instead." I believe that's Michael's words. Initially, Mr. Naminya and his team thought they would wrap things up in about a week, but their stay in Los Angeles kept extending. The reason was the high demands from Michael and his team regarding the music. Since games are digital, beats are precisely marked at intervals of several dozen frames per second. By slightly shifting those intervals, a sense of groove is created. But Michael and Brad were very particular about how to make those shifts. "I want a little more pause here. Michael's music needs more groove. However, if we shift the intervals any further, the beats will be off." And this back and forth continued, leading Mr. Naminya and his team to gradually feel that they couldn't return until the Michael side was satisfied. At the time, there was also limitations on the capacity of memory chips, making it impossible to avoid a decline in sound quality. Back to my writing. There's another reason this was inevitable. In the transition from Sonic 2 to 3, the sound driver ended up being reworked by Yoshiaki Kashima, a Sega composer who did the original Blue Spheres theme. Its imperfections can be clearly seen in the 1103 prototype, though these kinks would be worked out later. It seems that during the time of Brad, this held programmers back considerably. Vocal and percussive samples were also heavily compressed from 780 buffer interrupts in the DAC. The DAC is basically the channel that would play samples. Okay, back to Mayumi's writing. The Japanese people that Michael loved always asked Mr. Namiya in a gentler tone, "Can you try a little harder?" and "Can you improve a little more?" There was never a time when he said something arrogant like, "This is completely unacceptable," or ordered him around. This was likely related to Michael's upbringing. Michael once told Mr. Namiya, "During the Jackson 5 days, I was always scolded harshly while working, so I don't want to do that. I just expect everyone to do their best work as professionals." Furthermore, gaining the confidence to work with anyone was a significant achievement for Mr. Namiya. Through working with Michael, who is the world's greatest creator, Mr. Namiya reaffirmed that the importance of recognizing each other's professionals, debating opinions, and achieving higher results. Okay, now back to a chunky passage in my writing. Now would be an appropriate time to discuss the connections for 8 of these 41 cues, which were confirmed by either fan findings or statements from people involved. Carnival Night Zone is up first on the game's journey. Since, well, it's a carnival, it's a funky New Jack swing arrangement of Battle of the Gladiators, with various bits from the Dangerous album. It leans into the circus vibe with the FM patches, also called instruments, while also giving an eerie vibe through the drops into dead silence, prompted by glass shattering sourced from In the Closet. Brad claimed Michael's beatboxing was cut up and spliced into several tracks. However, the mouth percussion here is from Teddy Riley in Why You Wanna Trip on Me. And the loopback is a flourish lifted directly from Jam, complete with a compressed heavy D shout. Ice Cap Zone is one of the most iconic tracks from this game, and for good reason. It's a melancholic new wave tune that perfectly encapsulates the Arctic set pieces. In the 1980s, Brad was in a band named The Jetsons, and worked with Bruce Cannell on the track Hard Times, which was unreleased until a compilation album in 2008. Brad repurposed his parts of the composition for this stage, with unique percussion, ambient sound effects, and an altered chorus. Bruce expressed optimistic surprise years later. Launch Base Zone is percussive and features a signature groove akin to the likes of Bad or Billie Jean. While it seems to be original, most patches, the channel layout, and noise pattern are lifted from the 1103 credits theme, indicating they were possibly both programmed by Tatsuyuki Maeda. The Go sample is prominent throughout the track as well, taken from Run DMC's Peter Piper. The competition menu theme also has unique swing and synths that resemble Michael's style. The mini-boss theme is the most complex of the bunch, not staying on a single progression for most of its length, while also using unique tricks on both sound chips to achieve some funky effects, most notably with the FM-PSG lead combo. The backing chords borrow a patch from Moonwalker, and resemble the unreleased track Is It Scary? Samples from Edmund Eichen, Rob Bass, and James Brown are used. The Blood on the Dance Floor drums were used for this and Knuckles' theme. The emotional credits theme has the most interesting history attached to it, but mainly with how to carry on beyond Sonic rather than just the original cue. This version, however, does actually feature Michael beatboxing, unlike Carnival Night, with high-quality counterparts of the samples being used later in Space Channel 5. Michael called Brad over when he was going through depression from an event I'll later detail, and upon Brad inquiring whether he wanted to hear the cassette he had brought with him, which featured all 41 Sonic cues, Michael rejected them and asked Brad to play something, which led to him playing the verse and then coming up with the chorus on the spot. Michael was delighted, and they came up with the entirety of what would later become Stranger in Moscow in an hour and a half. Brad went uncredited for his work on the later single. He still felt gratitude for it, and would not only later detail this anecdote, but also play both versions to an audience. I will show the video here of that. These were all the tracks that made it into the retail release of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in February 1994. However, there is one other known selection we do know about which didn't make the cut. Michael had submitted Black or White to be arranged, but it ultimately faced legal opposition, much like with Thriller and Moonwalker. Supposedly, the quote-unquote FM sound source is still stored in Sega's archives. Back to Mayumi's writing. Are you okay? Aren't you cold? I was nearby during the exchange, and Michael asked Mr. Naminya and others, why does the sound of the past games in the same series sound better? When Mr. Naminya responded, the content of the games is much more interesting than before. As a result, there is less memory allocated for the music. Michael replied, I understand. Then remove this track. I'll create a new song instead. He never gave up, even when he understood his limitations, and he was always willing to make efforts and come up with ideas to improve things. That was Michael. Considering the plan to release it at Christmas, the schedule was tight, but Mr. Naminya and his team managed to get approval while Michael was staying in Kyushu. Then, the day after they received the go-ahead, thanks to Michael's kindness, all Sega staff were invited to the second day of the concert. That's all the writings from Naminya, so the rest is me. No official contracts were ever signed. No credit was given to the King of Pop. Even then, Michael was still on good terms with Sega. He even flew some of the individuals on the game's team down to Neverland Ranch, going by photos which the lead programmer, Yuji Naka, shared. He assisted with the localization of the AS1 Scramble Training Simulator ride, and appeared in the Space Channel game. In August of 1993, Michael was accused of sexually abusing a child at Neverland Ranch. This would damage his reputation, with several more allegations and another trial in 2005 cropping up over the years. His sponsorship with Pepsi ended, the Dangerous World Tour concluded early, and several projects were cancelled. Meanwhile, Sonic 3 was facing a turbulent time in its development cycle. The game ended up being split into two, due to time constraints from the pending McDonald's deal and cartridge space issues. Sega's sound team selected the aforementioned 7 tracks to be featured, with the rest being Sega's and Cube's work but more refined. Earlier versions of the prototype music were in the PC release, Sonic and Knuckles collection, as well as Sonic Origins later, both instead of Brad's team's work. Yuji Naka, Roger Hector, and Howard Drawson, among other sound team members, confirmed Michael's connection to the project, with the former noting some music made it in but was removed in Origins, while the rest stated all traces of his work were wiped because of his investigation at the time. Brad and his sound team, whose names remain in credits even with versions leaving their cues out, said Michael was uncredited because of his dissatisfaction with the sound quality. Legal disputes would later rise up, which barred the game from being re-released throughout the 2010s beyond emulation. A lawsuit was confirmed by Sirocco Jones in 2021, where since he and the sound team still owned the rights to their particular tracks, they found they weren't receiving royalties, mainly for the digital Steam listing, seemingly explaining why that was delisted upon Origin's release, though it's unknown why the previous games also were. Sirocco as well as Doug Grigsby would later pass away, leaving the matter partially unresolved, but forcing Sega to keep excluding their contributions for any further releases they did for the game. The legacy of Buxer and Michael's contributions continue to live on. Remixes, love for themes like Ice Cap in the credits, as well as their connected tracks, and efforts to interpret a full MJ-infused soundtrack, such as the fan album Buxer Basher, have surfaced on the internet over the years. The fact that Michael himself inspired the 90s look to the Blue Superstar speaks volumes to how much of a mark he left on pop culture as a whole, let alone the final installment in this beloved retro quadrilogy. So that's my write-up I did on the current knowledge we have of the Michael Jackson and Brad Buxer side of the Sonic 3 music situation. I hope you all enjoyed listening to that. Again, the link's in the description if you want the document that I read here. And yeah, hope you all have a good day.